I am like we've done in the past, folks. I'm going to go ahead and record these and get you the link. But Don, Jill, why don't I turn it over to you folks to kick us off?
Okay, cool. All right, well, look, firstly, thank you to everyone for making the time to be here today. A lot of you will have attended the style trainings that we've done with Travis before, and you'll understand the value that we derived out of that, and that was significant, to be honest, and I think it has revolutionised the way that we think about our work and what we do and how we interact with each other. So last year I was looking at where do we go from there? Do we just continue to focus on the styles training and evolve that and roll that out to our people? And we said, yes, that's still very important. So we have got this process where we're inducting people into styles and we're explaining how we work. But I suppose the other thing that I really saw is I saw the growth that the business has gone through in the last few years, to the point where we're now becoming a significant size business, and it's around leadership. A lot of our challenges we're facing actually around leadership and how we deal with that. So Jill and I had a discussion with Travis, and we said, look, we've done the styles, we're really good at that, we still see the value in that, we continue to drive that through our business, but we think we have some new challenges because of our growth, and that's around leadership styles and what we're doing, because what we're really making people do is a lot of people are stepping out of their traditional technical roles and starting to take on a more of a leadership role. You know, I mean, perfect case in point is Naomi, who a couple of years ago had 2 staff. She had 1 staff. She's now got 10 staff, right? And that has put huge strain on Naomi and the business as a whole. And I think it's important that we help all those people that are going through that sort of change around their leadership styles and what we can do. So we had a discussion with Travis, and Travis showed us some of his material he was talking through, and we thought it was really, really good. Because, you know, one of the things I think that we probably, and you will have seen, I intimated to this in the email I sent out to you all before we started the course, was one of the things about leadership is sort of having the difficult conversations, you know, and those are hard to have, and we all understand that, but I think Travis will take us through a lot of material on this course that will help us understand the reason why we need to have those difficult conversations, how we can have them, and how it's not only good for the company and you as an individual to have those conversations, it's also good for the other party as well. Yeah, because when we look at our feedback we've had over the Connects with survey over the last couple of years, we've had some fantastic results in terms of the culture and the environment and everything else we're doing. The one area that we're really scoring low on, and as a leadership group we need to think about how we can get this better, is that we actually tolerate poor performance. Which was interesting because we thought we'd actually, last year, particularly in the Wellington office, sort of wanted to be able to publicly executed a couple of staff members to show that we didn't tolerate poor performance. But again, we've got a really low score on that tolerating poor performance. And when I dig into that a little bit more deeper and did a bit more navel gazing about it, I came to the conclusion that the message we were getting from the staff was that we shouldn't let it get to the point where we have to do those public executions. We should be managing performance and clearly outlining the expectations and you know, having the great conversations with staff that are doing really good and having the difficult conversations with staff that aren't doing so well. You know, so we need to start that process much, much earlier. So, yeah, that was really what's driven our desire to have this course.
Yeah, it's terrific. Yeah, I mean, and I would imagine that makes sense to folks. And you did send that email out, you know, Don, and everybody's had a chance to read that. But this will be a different experience, I think. You know, I was talking to the guys from Auckland before the rest of you joined that for me, you guys, this is my first love. It's talking to people in a leadership position. So, you know, you'll recall that, you know, our concept in Market Force is to wire people for prosperity, not for break-even performance, and that prosperity is equal parts wisdom and wealth, which is money and knowledge, or knowledge and money for the benefit of the community. And so for me, like I was starting to say, is this is my first love, truthfully, because, I've had the privilege of running a few different businesses. I've had the privilege of sitting with people who run very big businesses. And as we get into this, for someone like Naomi going from 1 staff to 10 in 2 years, there are certain things that, we can map out and we can talk about as a framework. And there are other things that you can't, perfectly prescribe. And so what I really want to set the context on in this course, you guys, is this will be a bit more of a conversation, a leadership dialogue. And so one of the gentlemen from Auckland was saying that even coming to this meeting today, he's having a little trouble with his junior staff. And I'm not sure who said that, and maybe you were actually joking a little bit. I'm not sure, but I'll find out today, because to me, you guys, what I want to make sure we're doing is we're kind of leaning into this. And we're leaning into it in a particular perspective here. And in your career, what I hope you understand is you're going to do a bunch of professional development, especially at a company like Colliers. But there's really 3 areas of professional development. Number one is, and you may want to make a note of this, because since you all are leaders of other people, these are the things that you should be focused on for your people as well. Okay, so the first area is business skills, and business skills are certain skills that are transferable regardless of what industry you're in. So reading a profit and loss statement, presentation skills training, things like that, regardless of industry, that's a good business skill. Technical skill is industry specific. So these are the things that you're learning, and because you guys have, as Don was just saying, many of you, if not all of you, have kind of come up and been producers, and now you're moving up into leadership, what that's showing is you have a tremendous amount of technical expertise in this industry. And those 2 things are 2 legs of the stool. So I'm not discounting those, but the one that is most often overlooked is what Don and Jill set this course up to be, which is the conversation around human dynamics, how to have the challenging conversations, why it's important to have the challenging conversations, okay, how to monitor the people on your team, whether they're becoming better players or worse players, okay, again, with Naomi having 10 people that report to you. I mean, we got to be looking at that roster with a very keen eye about who's going to make it and who isn't. And, look, I'm not saying that human dynamics is more important than business and technical skills, though there is emerging evidence that it is pretty important. But I'm saying is that it's at least as important, and I'm sorry about the phone, it is at least as important as the other 2. And too often it is overlooked, but not by Don and Jill, and that's why we're doing this series. Okay, so, sorry, it'll stop. I hope that people are coming to this call in any kind of a, sit back, just listen, okay, that kind of thing. What I want you to do is lean into this conversation, and I'm going to pick on you throughout. I'm going to ask you questions throughout, because what's really important here is for us to kind of get a sense, all of us, get a sense of how you think about leadership and how you think about the concepts that we're going to be going through. Is that fair, everybody? Everybody with me on that? Yep. Okay. Good. So the first conversation that I'd like to have with you, and I will pick on somebody for these, even though I'm still setting up a little bit in the course, but I'm curious, and I'm just going to start, quite honestly, right at the top of my list. Andrew Potter, do you have a feel for the difference between context and content? And if you don't, it's okay, but I'm just curious if you've ever heard anything, or if you think they are different, and if you do, how are they different?
Well, I suppose my initial thoughts would be that context is certainly has an input into putting things into perspective. Content perhaps bit more sort of task orientated, something around some specific event.
Okay, that's really good. I'm writing that down because I'm going to steal that too. Okay, that's really good. Okay, but I think you're right. See, the context represents more of the perspective. Excuse me. It's the big picture about why we are doing something. The content is more around the tasks of what we're doing, the specifics. So just somewhere make a note, you guys, of this difference, however you want to do it. Next to context, you could put perspective. Next to content, you could put tasks. I think that's really good. Andrew? So what I want to do is kind of give you a visual real quick that content many times is a lot of different things that we're doing. But if somebody doesn't put a little perspective, as Andrew said, about why we're doing it, a lot of times the content doesn't make any sense. And I'm sure it's not lost on any of you that a big part of leadership is being able to hold the context for other people. And we're actually going to talk about that today specifically as a role of leadership. And many of you, quite frankly, put that having a plan for success was one of the lower things on the domains of leadership, specific columns that you felt was a little bit lacking. Well, a lot of times not having a plan for success as the leader means that you're not giving people context for why they're doing things, and that can cause massive amounts of confusion in the environment. So that's not lost on me that that's going to be something that we're going to focus on pretty heavily in this course. Okay? But what I want to do for a minute is just give you the context of why we're doing this series a little bit more specifically. So the big picture is, and Don was saying this a little bit, many of you are moving now out of your comfort zone of being very strong producers. And I would imagine all of you understand that the skills of being a strong producer are not the skills that make you a strong leader. You all understand that, right?
Yeah.
Yes or no? Yeah. And you all have seen people, like in sports, who might be one of the best players in a particular sport, and then they become a coach, and they're terrible. And you'll also see the person who was never a very good player become a coach, and they turn out to be a great coach. And that's because leadership and production have very different contexts, very different approaches, very different skill sets required. And many times people don't make it from production to leadership. So obviously what we're going to be doing here is asking you to really start pushing yourself from a context of production to a context of leadership, and how does that change what you're going to be working on. In this course, a couple of things that we're going to do is work with you a little bit on that plan for success, give you some ideas about how to move things forward strategically and tactically. As Don was saying, okay, communication in terms of overcoming obstacles and having those challenging conversations, and specifically some tools. Now, just by way of a visual, and some of you have probably seen this before, there is what you know, there is what you don't know, and then, of course, there is what you don't even know that you don't know. And what I'm hoping to approach in this course, at least a little bit, as we frame up leadership, is not the stuff you already know or even the stuff you know you don't know. It's maybe to push into that domain that's way outside your comfort zone of stuff you didn't even know you didn't know. Now, I'm not saying that because I'm going to try to dazzle you with anything. I'm not smart enough to be able to do that, but I do think that many times leadership conversations push you outside your comfort zone, and I'm sure expecting all of you to be ready for that. The experience of learning looks a little bit like this. Have any of you ever seen this progression, starting with unconscious incompetence? If you've heard this before or seen this phrase, unconscious incompetence, you know where this is going. Have any of you ever seen this before?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So I won't spend a lot of time. So unconscious incompetence is when you're a complete bull in a china shop and you don't even know what you don't know and you have no idea that what you're doing is causing problems. Then you move to a moment of conscious incompetence, which means you start to realize the stuff that you're doing that could be causing a problem. And then you move to conscious competence, where you're actually able to do something with some of the new tools that you're learning, but it feels a little bit more mechanical. And then someday you're actually able to move that to unconscious competence, which means that it just becomes part of your game. And this little progression of learning, you guys, is another little thing, and I know some of you have seen it, but again, you're going to be working with people on your teams, and this is a lot of what they have to go through to learn how to do the production that you used to be doing. As you're moving into leadership, they're moving up in production. So you've got people going through this. How this progression actually feels is that you don't just jump from unconscious incompetence to being really good at something. How it typically looks is, at first, you actually feel like you're getting worse. So what they call this in learning circles is that this is actually the valley of despair. Now, I'm not suggesting that any of you are going to feel like shit because you're in this course, but, you know, there may be times where you're going to be pushed a little bit to be doing some different things that don't feel good in the moment because it's very different. As you do those things, it'll start to feel better, and then ultimately it should take you to a higher plateau. But make no mistake, anything that you learn in the initial experience of learning it has a bit of a down energy to it because it's something you start going, oh my gosh, I didn't know that I didn't know that. Okay, so I'm not trying to overkill it. I went through that fast. I know you've seen similar things before, but I'm hoping as you look in the context of leadership that you're also realizing that these are the kinds of things that you need to be able to explain to your teams as you go forward. I would imagine there are no questions. It's okay if there is. Anybody have any questions about what this course is going to be like, what we're kind of expecting, why Don and Jill set it up? Any questions at all before we start getting into some leadership discussion?
So, Travis, I mean,
yeah.
I suppose, how do you identify if one of your staff are in that valley of despair? Because our model typically involves, we recruit a lot of grads into our business, and I think that they join a team where they've probably got some people around them who are pretty competent, and they might actually sort of be really, really struggling with that. How would you identify where they're in that valley of despair, and what would you say we should do with them?
Well, in a lot of ways, we're going to be looking at that, okay? And now I'm not avoiding the question. I'll give you kind of the short, but in next week's discussion and the week after, assuming that we don't have a scheduling snafu due to something on my end, and we'll talk about that at the end of the call today. But one of the things that you want to look for is when people start becoming defensive and resistant. Because in that moment, they're being typically asked to act outside something they already know. And that looks like death to most people because, as you know from Market Force, their identity is being impacted. And so a lot of what a good leader does is they make these distinctions for people when there's no pressure. You think about this, you guys. What a good leader does. Do any of you, have any of you ever heard of John Wooden? And it's okay if you hadn't, I don't want to be too American-centric. Anybody ever heard of John Wooden, the basketball coach from America? No? No. Okay, fair enough. Okay, in the United States, one of the most famous coaches is a gentleman named John Wooden. If you ever want to read great leadership books, which, by the way, I highly recommend, you are all leaders. You should be reading leadership books somewhere. But John Wooden has written a couple of great books. He was a basketball coach, men's basketball coach at University of California in Los Angeles. And he won something like 13 national titles, which, you know, the person who's won the second most national titles has essentially won 4. So he won 13 of them. So he was a guy who didn't read about leadership. He actually was a great leader. And what he used to say, Don, is that he did no coaching. He did no coaching during the game. He did all of his coaching in practice. By the time the game hit, people were, you know, there was nothing new they could learn. So during the game, all he managed was taking people out if they were tired and all that kind of stuff. So I'm not saying it like an answer, but it's something that we're going to talk about in this series. When you know, a big part of leadership is doing the work before the pressure hits. What too many people do is they wait until the pressure hits, and if you remember from Market Force, when the pressure hits, that's when people start losing their minds. It's too late.
Right.
So we're going to get into that, Don, as we go, but it's a great question. What do you do with people who are in the valley of despair? Let's mark it down, and next week I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about the next 2 weeks. I'm going to be talking to you a little bit more, but I want to do something a little bit different today, if you're okay with that.
Yep. Cool.
Yep. Okay. Very good. All right, you guys, so let's start to have a bit of a leadership discussion. And what I'd like each one of you to do is to take a couple of minutes, or however long we need. And I do mean I'd like all of you to do this. And I've got 2 questions here for you. So let's make sure that you guys understand the questions before you start writing some things down. What I would like you to answer for me is, number 1, what is leadership supposed to be? And number 2, in your experience, what does leadership actually become, or what does it actually look like? So by way of just example, think about it this way. Every year, each one of you guys is asked to do a forecast and a projection of what's going to happen in your team or your department or the business overall. And then every year, there's an actual outcome of how your business performs. Well, in my mind, when a lot of people talk about leadership, they say things like, well, it's about motivating people, it's about inspiring people, it's about having a vision. But what nobody really talks about is, what does leadership actually become? And that's why I have here, you tell me. Like, I'm not looking for a right answer. There isn't one. But what I'm curious about is, I want to know. I want to know how you think about what leadership actually looks like. Like, what's been your experience, either working here at Colliers, or if you worked somewhere else and had a good leader, what did the leadership actually look like? What did it feel like? What did that person do? And it could be good, it could be bad. Again, I got no agenda. But what I don't want is like the Harvard answer of what leadership is supposed to be. I want to know what has been your experience of what leadership actually becomes. So is everybody clear about what the 2 questions are? Yes or no?
Yep. Yep.
Yep. Okay, great. So take a couple minutes, please, each one of you guys, and just write down what you think. What is leadership supposed to be in your mind, and what does it actually become? You know, I don't want to waste time. I also don't want to rush. So just let me know. Everybody want another couple minutes, or you feel like you're kind of ready to go? We'll give it a minute. Okay? More time, or are we ready?
We're ready?
Yep, I think we're ready.
Ready. Okay, great. All right, so, Naomi, since your name already came up, let me just ask you, like, what kinds of things did you write down for what leadership is supposed to be?
Well, I actually wrote one sentence down to cover both of them because I think it answers both of them, and I said it was the go-to person who can bring together a team that works to a common goal resulting in success.
Go-to person who...
Bring together a team that works to a common goal resulting in success.
Okay, great. Let me, and maybe I didn't capture all of it, but let me ask you this. You're saying that that kind of covers both. Is that what I heard you say?
Yep.
Okay. So your experience has been that you've actually had leaders do that.
Yep.
Correct? Okay, great. I mean, that's what I mean. I got no agenda here. Sorry.
That's what I expect of people who lead me.
I'm sorry, say it again.
That is what I would expect of a person who was leading me.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's what you would expect, and it's what you have experienced. Okay. Look, that's great. Okay. Do you feel like you're doing that for the 10 people that report to you right now?
Probably about 70%.
Okay. Okay, great. I was just putting you on the spot. I was curious. Okay. Who else? What did other people put down for what leadership is supposed to be?
Travis, it's Jill. I've put down, because I've kind of counted both the supposed to and the actual, and that I believe leadership is supposed to be about guidance, being supportive, have an overseeing perspective and pushing the team forward. But actually what I think happens is it becomes instructive or directive. You're actually immersed in the work and you are backtracking instead of pushing forward and putting out fires.
Okay. Yeah. Very good. Who else?
On that. Travis, just put some context around that. Jill's going through a particularly difficult project at the moment with some transition of some functions in the business. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, but see, that's why I want to do this. I just want to get some perspective, some ideas. Because keep in mind, folks, many of you are moving from production to leadership. And this conversation is important because I'm going to show you guys in a couple minutes what's been our experience of what happens. But who else? I need a couple others. What is leadership supposed to be, and what does it become?
Carl here. Travis, Carl here.
Yeah, Carl. Yeah.
I think just looking at what management's supposed to be, it's always nice. Carl, yeah. Carol. It's always nice to like motivation. Setting and managing staff. I think that's what it's supposed to be.
What came after motivation?
Achieving your objectives and sort of setting and working towards your objectives, and managing your staff and managing your clients. What I think it actually becomes is it gets a bit more personal than that. It's a sort of multifaceted sort of thing of dealing with personalities. That incorporates praising and disciplining them, making tough calls, delegating to achieve your objectives, developing trust and understanding the limitations of those people that you're working with. Developing skills and setting standards for those people that you're leading as well.
And so again, when you say the things about the developing of skills and things like that, and look, I know we're talking and you're talking with you know, the leader of your team as well, but you've had the experience, Carl, with different leaders that they really get in there and they, you know, they've got to deal with the personalities, they've got to make tough calls, they work on delegation, they build the trust, they help people develop their skills. Those things have actually happened when you've had leaders above you, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
So what's happening at your role at the moment, Carl?
Oh, yeah, very much so.
Your role was really about that, like, as you build that team up, you dealt with all of those things, haven't you?
Yeah. Yeah, that's good.
If it's not here, I think sometimes delegating and enabling your team to, or passing the work on, enabling your team to do the work is sort of sometimes sits in the supposed to happen, but a lot of the time leaders end up wanting to retain control and find it difficult to delegate or to trust their staff to do the work.
Yeah, but have you had that experience?
Yes, in the past I have.
Yeah, and I'm curious, what was it like? What was it like for you to have a leader who did that?
It can be frustrating.
Okay. Yep. Okay. Very good. And I'm sorry, who was that? Who was that?
Scott.
That was an aside. That was Scott. Yeah.
Scott, I'm sorry, it's just taking me a second. Okay. I just like to get notes. Okay, yeah, one more person. I heard somebody else.
Travis, it's Will here, and I've had some experience with a very bad leader. They actually lost their job because of it. So they were expert at their business skills and technical skills, but had absolutely zero human dynamic skills. The words I'd use would be dictatorship and unapproachable to them. It was awful.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. Now, when you know, Will, in that example, when, you know, and maybe this person didn't do it at all, but did they ever talk about what their leadership was going to be? Did they ever give you a different expectation? Did they ever tell you what it was going to be, like what it was supposed to be?
Yeah, I think they thought. I think they were, what was those other words you used before around, I didn't write it down, but I think they thought they were a good leader, and so they talked about how good they were at leading, but the reality was that they weren't. And all this were frightened is probably the right word.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, right. You know, at some level, they were probably, you know, was that person, were they pretty good at the business and technical, like you said, like in their history coming up through the ranks, had they been pretty good at their job?
Extremely good.
Yeah. Okay, so...
Don's a very good leader, Travis. He communicates to us very well about his leadership style. It's his way or the highway.
Hey, at least there's no mixed messages. Yeah. Okay, but now look, I mean, and I get that, okay, and I know, you know, for some of us we're talking about it, Don's in the room and all that, but what I appreciate is just a different perspective and looking, just hearing from your colleagues about, you know, different experiences that people have had. What I'd at least like to do is frame up what in our experience, what leadership becomes. And when I go through this, you guys, and it's in your workbook and there's some space for you to write this down, but even more than writing it down, what I want you to do is just think about this, and what I want to put on the table is this is the biggest trap for people who have been really good at their jobs. So this is what we call a star player system. And a star player system, as you see in your workbook there, looks a little different on the screen, but you'll get the same kind of feeling. What happens in a star player system is the leader puts themselves between their people and whoever the market is. And they begin to build a system that relies heavily on the leader as the star player. So the leader is holding themselves between their people and the market. Now, they're not doing it on purpose. Kind of like you were saying, Will, I'm not sure, maybe some people do, by the way, but I'm not sure that many people would go into leadership with this particular definition that I'm putting on the screen. That leadership for many people becomes, my job is to run around and intervene in the failure of others before their failure hits our market. And for many people who have been really good at their jobs, who have been really good at production, this is how they became successful. They would run around and become the go-to person to take on anything that looked like it had a chance of failure and make sure it didn't fail. And so the very thing that they got rewarded for moving up through the ranks, when they get into a leadership mode, becomes the very problem. And the source of the problem, in our estimation, is threefold. So number one, what it starts to do, you guys, is it creates an organization that is too slow. There's too much reliance on somebody who used to be really good at production, and everything's got to go through that person or a small group of people. Number two, and this phrase may hit you a little sideways, but I want you to think about it. This type of organizational performance creates learned helplessness in the environment. Nobody knows what to do without the leader there. So the leader goes on vacation, and then they keep getting calls, and they keep jumping back in. They keep getting pulled back into meetings. People come to them and say, look, what do you think I should do here? Should I do X or Y? And the leader goes, well, yeah, you do X. And what the leader doesn't realize they're doing in that moment by answering that question is they're creating a codependency in the environment where the other person can't do it without the leader. And number three, what this organization will begin to build over time is an organization of very passive players, order takers, people who want to be told what to do. Okay? So look, this is a pretty harsh kind of overview, I get that. But I'm putting it on the table early because in a lot of ways, you guys, and Don said it again today, and he said it to Jill, or Jill and Don said it to me when we were going through this, and it's not a negative, but a lot of you have been really good at your job. And what you have to be careful, well, you don't have to do anything. What you could be careful about now that you're going into leadership is that the very skills that made you really good in production could end up costing you dramatically in the organization. As a matter of fact, one of the things one of the reasons that, the three of us decided on this series is what I was saying to Don is, look, if we don't create an environment where people don't, if we create an environment where people have to keep coming to you, Don, to have the challenging conversations with people, or you, Jill, to have the challenging conversations with people, then what you're building is a star player system where you guys have to be involved in all those challenging conversations. And it's too slow. We can't do it.
Trevor, is it fair to say that this isn't a black or white area? Like, there are lots of shades of grey along the spectrum, and at times there is a role for that star player system.
Totally.
Where, I'm thinking about, in our case, sometimes we hire some graduates, and they're incredibly naive.
Yes.
And so, just as the contract manager might say, right, well, I want to check your emails before they go out. Or I want to check your letters before you go out. And I think that's okay, and that's actually a training thing. But I think it's when it becomes overly dominating, as, they almost defer to you for everything, rather than having any initiative themselves.
Well, see, now look, what I want to be very clear about, you guys, when I'm talking in this course, if I talk in absolutes, then you should do like Don's doing here, and you should jump in, because let's all be very clear about something. There is absolutely nothing in leadership that is in black and white. I mean, leadership by definition is being able to live in the gray. Because if it were black and white, we could just hand you, it could be a star player system. We could just hand you the card of what to do, and you could just go do it. But that's not what leadership is. So absolutely, Don, it's operating more on a spectrum. But to your point, if it lasts too long and there's no intent to move it to what we're about to talk about, then what you're going to end up with, whole and complete, is an organization that starts looking like this. And again, I will say, I have rarely met anybody who has had the intention of building the organization this way. So it's not because of malicious intent. It's because what people do is they bring production habits into leadership. Is this making sense?
I can actually see situations where...
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, it's Rose here from me.
Right. No, Rose. I can't see anything.
Sorry, Trevor. So what you're saying is sometimes the star player system, when you say get a new graduate on board and you're training them, it's okay to sort of have this level?
Yeah.
Like you're obviously looking at their emails, you're looking at all the reports and things that go out for that first stage?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, see, the thing is, to me, okay, now I'm going to give you like kind of an individual perspective. To me, what you want to aspire to is to get people through that phase as quickly as possible. And for you guys as leaders, what is your mechanism for getting people through that training process quickly so that the reliance on you is less and less? Or maybe it's not even reliance on you at all. Maybe you're turning people over to somebody else on your team to do the training. So at least it's not reliance on you for the training, it's reliance on somebody else.
One of the ways of actually doing that, Travis, is I find is that you just voluntary copy a lot of your team into stuff, and it actually, I think it actually allows them to learn themselves as well, as opposed to sort of having to go through those checks and processes, which is like if you just encourage to copy them in, people by default they learn to align things in the way that you do anyway.
Well, what you're taking them from, you're taking from conscious incompetence to conscious incompetence, and then on to conscious competence, aren't you? You're taking them on that journey. Yep.
Yeah.
Steve, what were you going to say before?
I can actually see businesses, so you're saying that you don't think businesses start out to be like this. There are certain silos of businesses that actually run on that model, and they'll keep, they'll suppress the people below them because it's fee-driven above them, and they'll, they don't want to promote. I mean, what you're describing is bad leadership, effectively, and like I can see people, just saying things like, I don't want to be your safety net every time, and, you've got to get up to speed, and it's just bad leadership that they don't give the people working under them the skills to get to that situation. Well, I've seen this situation a lot, and I think some businesses actually do intend to run it on this model.
Yep.
And valuation.
Yeah, valuation.
Okay. Just for your background, Travis, Steve used to be a valuer, and I think as the valuer game, you do become a star player, and you do hold your graduates down because you singly develop the relationships with your clients.
Well, look even in sports, and I would imagine many of you, follow rugby, and even in rugby, okay, you can look at certain teams. I would imagine, I don't know anything about, rugby, but assuming that it's similar to like American football. In American football, you'll see certain teams every year go out and pay for very high-priced star players. And then they just build the rest of the team around them. And that's one approach to building a team. Certain other teams in American football are notorious for what we're going to talk about next, which is building star systems, which means they're less reliant on the people involved, and they're more reliant on having star systems. And what's interesting is star player systems, to everybody's point here, and back to what Don was asking about, it's not black or white. What you'll find many times is that a star player system can win in the short run, but its sustainability over the long run is very difficult because it's so dependent on a single person or a small group of people that if those people leave, or if those people die, or if those people quit, or even if those people stay, there's only so much capacity that that one person or that small group of people can get up to. And then it has a way of having a diminishing return. Everybody with me? Not like a right answer, but does that make some sense?
Is it also about, because with the star player system, you're trying to prevent the mistakes from happening or the mistakes from getting to the market. There's also about having more of a willingness to let those mistakes happen or let people learn from their mistakes and take the initiative and do things, but occasionally they're going to get it wrong, but be willing to back them up and help them learn from it.
Well, listen, and this again, I think, and I need to add this somewhere into this conversation because I think the way that Don said it was really good. I mean, you guys are the leaders. And what you get to do is to sit there and go, is it time to let this person go and face the music and fall on their face and learn, or do I need to step in because it's too big of a deal, it's too big of a client? And so back to Don's point, it's not a black and white thing. But this is why I was asking Will earlier, okay, when he said this about, when Will said this about, and Scott was saying it about a leader who will retain control. What I want you guys to think about is if you work for somebody who never gives you a chance and keeps taking the ball away from you and keeps intervening in your failure before it hits the market, your chance to go out and deal with clients, are you going to stay and work for that person?
A great example I've got, Travis, of this particular case. I was employed as a senior facilities manager, and we were getting paid quite well for it. I wasn't allowed to make a decision on whether soap dispensers should have a button on the front or a button on the top. That's what you're trying to avoid with the star player system, aren't you? Because he was making decisions like that for about 15 staff, all of whom were senior.
Well, that's what I mean is, how did that make you feel?
I just thought it was ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean, see, this is the thing, you guys, is when you are a producer, what you want are the opportunities to take on challenges. So don't become the leader that's not letting other people have the opportunity to take on challenges.
And it's delegation, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, yeah, so let's talk about it. See, our claim on what leadership is supposed to be is that you flip that triangle over and you start going to the back, just like many of you are saying, and you actually learn to become the coach of the team. And so the distinction that we use for what leadership is supposed to be is creating the space. Maybe you call that delegation, okay? But it's literally like getting people the space and providing them the tools. So, just throwing people into the deep end of the swimming pool, that's not a fair thing either. Like, hey, go do this. And the guy's like, like you were saying, Don, he's fresh out of school and he has no idea. Okay, that's not good leadership either because you're just setting people up to fail. So you create the space and you provide the tools for other people to accomplish or leave.
in my experience, often when you have a team of people who are relatively new, you need to basically be a star player, but over time, that team transfers into being a star system team as they get more experience and go working well.
Well, this is why I liked how Dawn was saying it about it's not black or white. So let me just put these up there, and then we'll talk more about what you're saying. See, to me, what you want to do, and actually, it's not even what you want to do. To me, what you are tasked with doing as a leader is having a plan for how you're going to get from a star leader system or a star player system to a star system. That's the path and the plan for success that you need to have. And if you don't have that, then because you have been so good at the job, you will create dependence on you. And not because you're a bad person, and not because you're not because you're trying to do that, but because if you don't think it through, just out of default, you'll start going, I don't have enough time to train this person, so I'm just going to tell them the answer. And in that moment, you're doing, potentially a good thing in the short run, but you're killing yourself in the long run. So to me, it's about having the awareness of this spectrum and having the awareness of what are you creating and picking and choosing your spot. How long does somebody need to be trained before you can let them go in front of a client? And what are the measurements for that person being able to do that? Is it just copying them in? Is it copying them in at the beginning and then taking them to 3 or 4 meetings and then having them shadow a particular project and then having them be a co-pilot on a project and then making them the lead? Like, to me, what a leader is supposed to do is start to outline what's the process for us to create this star system. And when you do it right, you get all these different results, the opposite results of the star player system, which is you get a faster organization because more people are touching the clients, touching the market, getting information, which creates the learning community. And, as Scott, I think it was Scott was saying, what it does is it allows the ambitious players to stay around. Because otherwise the ambitious players will go, you know what, there's no space for me. I'm making a lot of money, but this is ridiculous. I can't even make the simplest of decisions. I'm a senior person. I'm out. Me, what you're trying to do as a leader is you're trying to develop as quickly as you can from a star player system to a star system. And again, it's not black or white. Sometimes you're going to jump in. Sometimes it's too big of a client presentation. Sometimes there's too much risk involved. You've got to intervene in the failure. So just like Dawn was saying, it's not that one is always right and one is always wrong, but it's about understanding the environment that you could create if you're not careful.
Travis, I think your diagram is really good there, and what it is because the leader's still in the star system, right? But what it is they're the go-to person when you really fuck up.
Yeah.
So if one of the staff members fucks up and it goes horribly wrong, then the leader's still there as the go-to person. So the client still has that relationship. Like we're trying to move to a structure now where I don't have a relationship with so many clients because there's just too many for them to do it. But they know that as the contract director, if we really fuck up, it's my ass that they can haul in and they can get, they can have that discussion with. So I think it's really around the evolution as you're growing. You kind of have to move from one to the other. And I see us, historically, we might be more in the star player mode. We are moving towards that star system mode. And if we don't do it with our growth, it'll kill us all.
Probably a tendency, as a these days, there's probably a tendency to, when you operate the star system, and then something goes wrong, you switch to that star player system. But then, probably the ability of a good leader is to be able to switch back quicker, as opposed to someone who isn't, would then actually just protect that position for a longer period of time.
Correct, and you can't be that default person forever. So you have to. sort of the STAR system is a sustainable model. The STAR plan is almost a crisis management model.
And to be able to switch back out of it, whatever mechanisms you've got to put in place is...
No, listen, I think that's a great way to put it. Like, certain things happen, you got to jump back in. Okay, and...
You still put the leader outside the box, is what I'm, you know, like, while they're there, they're still sort of outside that triangle. So, whereas I expect with the STAR system, they're meant to be part of that triangle as well. Just a dramatic thing.
Yeah, they're the points of the triangle, aren't they?
Yeah, but just, they should be inside it.
Yeah, that's true. That is a achievement what we should be, you're right.
No, absolutely. I'm not saying to dive, but I mean, over and above that, it's what I love what you guys are doing now is you're looking at it in a pliable fashion, not black or white, just like Todd said, and you're going, you know, let's think about this. When there's a crisis, maybe you intervene, you flip the triangle over, but what a good leader needs to be able to do is flip it back over as quickly as possible, which may mean that we're sitting down with people and going, hey, what did you learn from that breakdown that we just had? Okay, what do we need to do next time to make sure we don't have this crisis? But again, what you're, at least in my, and I liked how Don just said it, a STAR system tends to be more sustainable over time. And a STAR player system tends to lead to the STAR player burning out or quite frankly leaving, and then all of a sudden we're totally screwed.
With the STAR system, I assume for the team, you want them to be understanding that they can also come to the leader and ask for guidance or assistance when they feel they need it as well.
Yeah. Well, and in a lot of ways, what you just did there was transition us to a question, okay? And so I want to put it back into what Andrew was saying about perspective. See, if we put a perspective around leadership, that it is, and there's nothing in the workbook on this, okay, this part, so, you know, this would just be taking some notes, but it's more about just for your consideration. I'm going to give you some potential guidance and ideas around this, but what I'd like to hear from you folks is, if we, at least for this conversation, were to agree that leadership is creating the space and providing the tools for others to accomplish, then what are the primary roles of what a leader should be doing? And I'm curious what you folks think. What kind of content should you be doing if your context is, hey, I'm the person that's supposed to create the space and provide the tools for others to accomplish or leave?
Act as a sounding board for when they're not sure.
Yeah, I'm going to write some of these down. I'm going to put it up here because I've got some stuff that's going to come out on what I was going to suggest, but I like the sounding board. What else?
Training.
Oh, say it again, I'm sorry. Yeah, training, yeah.
Training.
Encouragement. Planning and setting objectives.
Yep, what else?
Travis, I'd say it's quite important to try and find people's, or allow people to know what their natural strengths are and give them confidence in actually using them.
Yeah. What else?
Also to help them work on their weaknesses too.
Yeah. Work, weakness. Yeah. Anything? What else? I mean, it's a great list. I mean, because, guys, again, you know, what I'm going to show you now is a bit of what we kind of recommend in terms of keeping it simple, making it memorable, and just kind of giving you some guidance. But as you can see here, what's more important is for you guys, collectively, individually, to be thinking about. I mean, if your definition of leadership is anywhere close to what we put on here, then that needs to inform the primary content of what you're doing. Now here's what we would claim, let me move this, is that number one, what a good leader is able to do, and we're going to be talking about this primarily next week, okay, is you're able to manage energy. Number two, you're able to hold the context, which is very similar, by the way, to setting objectives. And number three, you're able to coach others. And what we're going to do for a couple of minutes, and again, when we go through this, guys, what I want to do here is mostly just provide you food for thought, because again, I'm not trying to give you the answer. It's not a black or white. So that's not the reason that we're doing this part for the last few minutes today. It's more to give you guys ideas off of what we've seen. But when we talk about managing energy, whoops, where did I go? I think I went to the wrong slide. Oh, when we talk about managing energy, we're talking about three things primarily. Number one, and many of you actually wrote about this as it relates to kind of managing your own personal energy. And quite frankly, when we looked at self-responsibility on the little self-assessments, manage my own energy was the lowest one in self-responsibility. And yet we would say that when you are the leader of a team, just as Colin Powell is saying here, one of the biggest things for you as a leader is knowing that everybody else is truing off of your energy. And if your energy sucks, everybody else's energy is going to suck. Whatever is happening for the leader will be reflected in the team. So if you're sick, if you're exhausted, if you're frustrated, that's what your team is going to start looking like. So having a plan around how you're going to manage your personal energy is of the utmost importance. Why? Because the next thing that you've got to get good at managing is the mood of the team. And next week specifically, we're going to talk to you about what managing mood really is. And it's not a soft conversation. Like what I mean by that is it's not airy-fairy. It's actually things that you can do to understand what a mood is, to influence how your team is operating and how they're feeling. And then the final thing, you guys, in management of energy is that each one of you, for the different people that you lead, should have certain cultural agreements about how that team is going to operate. And one of the biggest jobs of a leader is to make sure that those cultural agreements are being enforced and managed. Because just like Don was saying there, if we think we're doing a good job of, giving people honest and authentic feedback, but everybody else is telling us that we're not, then we're not living up to what people expect. We're not managing the cultural agreement. Okay? So these three primary areas become the primary areas for managing energy. Questions there? Not like an answer, but just questions there in terms of guidance. Knowing that we're going to do a little bit more on the management of team mood as well as personal energy. Okay? But let's go back here. Let's look at holding context. As one of you said about setting objectives, here's what people tend to want to know when they are on a team. They want to know, where are we? How did we get here? Where are we going? What's the context of our team? What's the plan? And do we have the right people in the right place? As one of you said, let's play to our strengths. Are we making progress? And in the absence of these things, people will make all kinds of judgments and assessments about where we should be going, about why things aren't good, all that kind of stuff. On a very well-managed team, the messaging is crystal clear. Everybody knows where we are. Not at all times, because there's no such thing as perfection, but that's at least the aspiration. Questions, comments there? Okay. What I wanted to do is get to this one because I wanted to put this out there a little bit, give you guys some ideas around, you know, being at the back end of that pyramid in terms of coaching others, just like many of you were saying. So one of the best things that you can do as a leader who's working in a STAR system is really learn to behave a bit more like a coach. And to make this a little bit more clear, what I want to show you is a spectrum, and I wouldn't mind if you guys wrote this down. So just draw a little, whatever that is, 4-inch line and put 5 ticks on it from left to right. And I want to show you a spectrum of tools that you have for how you interface with other people on your team. At the far left, put facilitation. Next up from that, put training. Next up from that, put mentoring. Next, put coaching. And next, put consulting. And just, you know, again, I'm going to keep reiterating it throughout the course, just like Don was saying. This isn't a black or white conversation. Every single one of these skills is an important skill for you to have as a leader. They're all valuable at different times. Just like one of you was saying, sometimes you have to jump in and flip that triangle back over and be a consultant and just tell everybody what to do. Sometimes you can keep the triangle flipped over and you can facilitate and let other people figure it out. Sometimes, as one of you was saying, we can do some training and show, you know, give some people some guidance and some things like that. So the key is understanding the difference and making sure that you're choosing from the toolbox the right tool to use at the right time. So is everybody with me so far, or am I boring anybody, or is this going okay? Is everybody with me? Yeah. Okay. I just, you know, I want to make sure. So here's a way of looking at this, and I'll send you the deck. So don't worry about getting everything exactly right. More than anything, I just want you to, you know, think these things through a little bit. Facilitation means that you are uninvolved in the process. You're a disinterested party, and you are there just to guide and ask others where they are trying to get to. You are facilitating. They are leading. Training means that you are showing people a framework. So you're demonstrating. So when I show you guys a STAR player system versus a STAR system, I'm showing you a framework. I'm not trying to give you an answer. I'm just showing you a framework. Okay? Mentoring means that you're actually sharing experience. You're sharing the knowledge that you learn from experience. And so you're either telling a story, or you might even tell somebody what to do. Look, in this situation, this is the best thing to do. I'm telling you because I've been through it. Coaching means that you're actually working to get people to apply a set of frameworks or apply a set of tools to a real-life situation that they are having. And the approach of coaching means that you're asking people questions. And I'm going to say again that for people who have been really, really good at production, sometimes they just know what to do and they want to tell other people what to do. And the skill of actually coaching other people is very unfamiliar, because you have to ask people questions you already know the answer to. And then finally, and I mentioned this earlier, the other tool that you can use is consulting, which means you just take it and do it, which means you just tell other people what to do or you do it yourself. Okay? So when we go back to this little spectrum, and we map over the context conversation, a lot of times it's really good to keep this little thing around But if you're trying to guide somebody, then you're in facilitation mode. If you're trying to show somebody something, you're in training mode. If you're sharing or telling, you're in mentoring mode. If you're asking, you're in a coaching mode. And if you're just telling somebody what to do, you're in consulting mode. And the danger, and again, I'm just putting it out there as like a warning, is that too much consulting will lead to a star player system. And yet that's the trap that many people, again, fall into who have been very good producers. So questions there, comments, observations? Make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
It's just in terms of the leader, Travis. A good leader should have the ability to do all of those things, though, isn't it? You know, like,
yeah.
We shouldn't just be sort of thinking about wanting to get to that right end.
Totally. No, a good leader, it's kind of like when we talked about, styles in the Market Force series that we did a while back. Like, once you understand what you're really, like, what your natural style is, you can start to learn to do some of the different things that the other styles do. So some of you are going to have really good strengths at facilitation. Some of you are going to have really good strengths at coaching. But the point is, take a look at the spectrum here, and yes, in my humble opinion, a strong leader should be working on all 5 of those skills and making sure that they're pulling out the right tool at the right time. And the reason I put this up on the screen is there's a recording on Colliers University. If you just, go on the hub and look up frameworks for leadership, you'll see a particular recording that I did for Colliers that's about 20 minutes long. It's called Viewing Leadership as a Coach. And, if you're interested in just, learning a little bit more and seeing some different techniques that you can use for each one of these skill sets, you may want to jump on and just take a look at that recording. It's 20 minutes. But to your question, my humble opinion is yes, a leader had better be able to move back and forth on this spectrum. Otherwise, they're going to have real problems over time. Okay? So if we go back here, just a couple other things. Coaching others means doing a little bit more listening and asking, a little less telling. It means understanding other people's styles and learning what matters to them. And then it's learning how to give people tools to set them up for success. So no mystery there. Nothing that I would imagine feels counterintuitive to anybody. But this is kind of, and we have about 7 minutes according to my clock. But this was where I wanted to end up today with you folks, was just kind of getting this out there that what is leadership? Well, we claim that leadership is space and tools. It's creating the space, providing the tools. And once you put that context around leadership, it starts to make sense that these are the primary things that you would do. Your job is to manage the energy, your job is to hold the context, and your job is to coach people. If sometimes you got to jump in there and flip that triangle back over and do it yourself to make sure that we don't lose a big client, by all means, do that. But understand the risks. And if you do that every time, you'll create a learned helplessness environment around you. And that's going to mean that you're going to create a lot of dependent people. It means your most ambitious people over time might go, man, I don't have any space around here to do anything myself, and they may leave. And I meet a lot of leaders who go, I can't let go because I don't have good enough people around me. And I always challenge those people, bullshit. You've created an environment where good people can't even show up. And that's what I want you folks thinking about as we kind of head towards wrap up and any questions you have. So I'm just going to put this image back up here. Questions, comments at this point, good, bad, or otherwise, anything from anybody at this point.
I was just going to say, I think a lot of the things when you talk about leaders and I think they're
they're more fearful of letting go than anything else. As, they have very much that control nature. I mean, but it's not even the style thing. It's like they feel they've got to that position. They just don't want to suddenly let it go. They want to sort of spend their 15 minutes in the limelight or 50 seconds of fame before something like those highlights. As opposed to
I liken it to, it's kind of like saying I want to experience skydive, right? So I put on my backpack and the parachute and jump in the plane, but I get out there and I'm too scared, so I don't jump out of it. So I come down and land again. Right? And if you have that leap of faith, you're never going to experience what skydiving is like. No. Yeah, you're right. It's fear. It's fear of failure. It's fear of the fact that the parachute won't open. You might have build towards the ground and go splat.
Travis, again, an example that was given at the beginning of this session was the number of people I ended up managing in the last year and a half. I think that the facilitation, training, mentoring, coaching, consulting, I ended up to cope just for those things, and I'm still doing it depending on where the person's at. Sometimes we get the whole team together and run training sessions. I mentor, coach, I'm at the consulting board, depending on what the topic is. So that was actually a really good summary of what sort of really happened and it's what's still happening as we bring new people on board or as new things happen in the contracts that I work on.
It's happening to a different degree though. You know, you're now...
So different aspects to a different degree. But all those things just happen on a daily basis, depending on the circumstances of the people.
Right. Well, see, to me, that's exactly right. See, nothing that we're going to talk about, it's just like the introduction to Market Force. There's nothing that we're going to talk about in this series that's an invention. What we're going to try to do is to map what's going to make you successful. So if all of us went out and climbed a mountain or, hiked up the mountain, we didn't invent the mountain, but if we went out on the mountain and we had a map, we might get to the top quicker. So now, like you say, you're coaching, you're consulting, you're facilitating, you're mentoring, you're doing all of those things every day. But sometimes when you map it out, you put it on the spectrum, you map it against a star player and a star system. What you know is if you do too much consulting, you're going to end up with a star player system. And so that little kind of map and that little kind of don't go off the trail over here because you'll end up with a star player system, unless that's your intention, okay, be careful. That becomes like a map for you, hopefully, in leadership. That's the purpose of this course, isn't the answer. It's just to give you some things as you guys get back out on the mountain that hopefully give you, a quicker way to the top. And I hope that's how it's, starting to feel is, there are no answers here, folks. I just, I remember when the first company I owned, I was really young. I mean, I had a great partner. He gave me a shot, and he probably shouldn't have taken a chance on me. But, I was like 22, 23, 24, 25. I sold at 27. But through that whole period, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And it just all felt totally overwhelming. And, as I look back on it, if I had had any tools during that period of time, I feel like I could have done a way better job. Now, to Don's point, I had the courage to kind of jump in. And at some point, being a leader means you got to really get comfortable with the fact that, 90% of the time you're not going to know the answer. Nobody knows the answer. Okay, but, jump in. But hopefully what we're going to do over the next, few weeks together is, look at things like this, hopefully prompt some ideas, prompt some conversation between and amongst all of you folks, and give you some guidance, give you some ideas for how to, provide better leadership for your people. Okay? So we're about out of time. Let me just ask the question. Jill, I saw your email back. You were not able to...
We'll move it out to the end. So we'll move it to the 16th of April.
Okay. So guys, I apologize. I've got just a great speaking opportunity next week. So we're going to have to skip next week. What I'm going to do is I'm going to send you some homework. It's not going to be intense homework. It's not going to be super hard. It's going to take you a little bit of time, though. but it's important now because what I want to focus the homework on is helping you folks in the self-respect domain of having a little bit more of an idea of what your plan is for success. And so I have a way that I want to work you towards that, so I'm going to start it out in the homework. So I'm going to put the homework together and get it to you by tomorrow at the very latest, and then you'll have about 2 weeks to do it, and then we'll pick up from here. Okay?
Cool.
All right, you guys, thank you all very much. Hope it felt like a good start, and I'll talk to you all in 2 weeks.
Thanks, Trevor.
Okay, thank you. Bye now.
See ya.
That,